They were America's golden children. Tap shoes, mouse ears, names stitched in big block letters across their sweaters. 39 kids who danced their way into the living rooms of a generation. But behind those black felt ears, some were headed somewhere nobody planned. A federal prison cell, a nude magazine spread, a quiet house in Oregon where a man's body went undiscovered for 9 months. 70 years later, this is where they all are. Number 1 is Annette Funicello, who played the girl next door for 4 seasons, and who was the only Mouseketeer Walt Disney himself ever handpicked. He saw her at 13, dancing the lead in Swan Lake at the Starlight Bowl in Burbank. He did not hold an audition. He walked backstage and offered her the show on the spot. By the end of the first season, she was receiving 6,000 fan letters a month, more than every other Mouseketeer combined. She dated fellow Mouseketeer Lonnie Burr during production, a romance the show never acknowledged, but the cast never forgot. When the finale aired in 1959, she told the cast she had never cried so hard in her life. After the show, Disney kept her under personal contract, the only Mouseketeer he ever did this for. Beach Party films with Frankie Avalon followed. Beach Party, Muscle Beach Party, Beach Blanket Bingo. She became the wholesome face of an entire era of American cinema. She married casting agent Jack Gilardi in 1965, had 3 children, and seemed to be living the life the ears had promised her. Then, in 1987, the symptoms began. Dizziness, balance problems, blurred vision. She hid them for 5 years, terrified that audiences would think she was drunk on stage. She finally went public in 1992. Multiple sclerosis, the most severe form. The disease took her ability to walk, then her ability to speak, then her ability to recognize her own family. Her second husband, rancher Glenn Holt, whom she married in 1986, cared for her at their property outside Bakersfield until the end, refusing to place her in a facility. On April 8, 2013, she died at Mercy Southwest Hospital in Bakersfield at age 70. When Walt Disney died in 1966, his final written note to her reportedly read, "Annette, never lose that wonderful smile." She never did, not even when the disease had taken everything else. Number 3 is Paul Petersen, who lasted exactly 3 weeks on the show and who has spent the 60 years since doing more for child performers than anyone else who ever wore the ears. He joined the Mickey Mouse Club in 1955 at age 10, one of the first 16 boys hired out of 5,000 who auditioned. 3 weeks in, a casting director named Lee Travers kept calling him Mouse, a nickname Petersen despised. One Friday, Travers came up from behind and used it again. Petersen turned, punched him in the stomach, and said, "Don't call me that, fatso." Standing directly behind Travers was Walt Disney. Petersen was fired by phone that afternoon. He thought he would have to return his bike. He came back stronger. By his teenage years, he was starring as Jeff Stone on The Donna Reed Show. 8 seasons, 275 episodes, a household face across America. But when the show ended, so did the work. The industry moved on without him. He turned to drugs, and later wrote with total honesty that the only thing he did not do was stick a needle in his arm. In 1990, the suicide of former child star Rusty Hamer, a man Petersen knew personally, broke something open. Petersen founded A Minor Consideration, a non-profit dedicated to protecting child performers from exploitation, improving labor laws, and reaching out to former child stars in crisis. He helped revise the Coogan Law to ensure child actors' earnings were protected. He fundraised for Johnny Crawford's Alzheimer's care when Crawford could no longer pay his medical bills. He turned one punch into a lifelong mission. He is 80 years old as I record this, still showing up, still making calls. Number 4 is Dorene Tracy, who was the show's self-described black sheep from the first day of production, and who in December 1976 posed nude for Gallery magazine, wearing nothing but her Mickey Mouse ears. Born in London in 1943, she moved to the United States at 4 and grew up in a dance studio her father ran in Hollywood. By 12, she had the energy, the voice, and the presence to land a spot on the show.
that's what wise men say. Now if you would be beautiful.
She was the 9th name called in the roll call when the series premiered. She stayed for all 4 years, one of only 9 to do so, while quietly breaking every unwritten Disney rule she could find, including sneaking cigarettes on the lot. After the show, she formed her own rock band called Doreen and the Invaders, toured Thailand and South Vietnam in 1968, performing for U.S. troops, became a publicist for Frank Zappa, and spent years at Warner Brothers Records promoting Tower of Power and the Doobie Brothers. Then came the gallery spread. Wearing only the ears, Disney cut ties immediately and banned her from reunions for years. She later said she had been swept up by ego and had not understood the lasting repercussions. Disney eventually forgave her. She attended the 2015 D23 reunion, her final television appearance. She died of pneumonia on January 10, 2018, at age 74 after a 2-year battle with cancer. Her son, 2 grandchildren, and an entire cast who called her Dodo because she always had a smile on her face survived her. Walt Disney told her once that the Mickey Mouse Club would probably be the greatest thing she ever did with her life. She spent 40 years trying to prove him wrong and then admitted, finally, that he had been right. Before we go further, a question for the comments. Do you remember the first time you watched the Mickey Mouse Club? Which name in that roll call did you wait for every afternoon? Tell me below. I read every one. If you haven't subscribed yet, every court record, death date, and verified personal detail in this script was confirmed before a word was written. Your subscription keeps that standard alive. Number 5 is Dennis Day, who sang and danced with the others for 2 seasons in the mid-1950s, and whose story became, without question, the darkest chapter this show has ever produced.
This is the way we get to see a mouse cartoon for you and me.
After the show ended, Day drifted quietly away from Hollywood. He found his partner, Ernest Caswell, in the 1970s. They moved to a small property in Phoenix, Oregon. They sold wine jellies at Renaissance fairs. Friends remembered them as gentle, creative people who had built exactly the life they wanted. Then, in the summer of 2018, Ernest, by then suffering from advanced dementia, reported Dennis missing. Police searched the property, found nothing. Neighbors had begun complaining about a smell coming from the house. Officers questioned the live-in handyman, Daniel Berta, who arrived at the interview with fresh scratches and bruises covering his arms. They released him. 9 months passed. In April 2019, Oregon State Police returned with a cadaver dog. Dennis Day's badly decomposed remains were found hidden inside his own bedroom, under a pile of clothes. He had been there the entire time. During one of the earlier searches, officers had stepped directly on his body without realizing it. Berta eventually pleaded no contest to criminally negligent homicide and abuse of a corpse, and was sentenced to just over 4 years in prison. Day's family filed a $2 million civil suit against the Phoenix Police Department for the failed investigation. The boy who had once sung for America on afternoon television died inside the home he had built with the man he loved, and it took 9 months and a cadaver dog to bring him out of it. Number 6 is Karen Pendleton, who closed every episode singing Goodbye alongside Cubby O'Brien, and who, in 1969, appearing on The Dating Game, picked Bobby Burgess as her chosen date after recognizing his voice before she could see his face. She was 8 years old when Disney producers swept through Los Angeles dance studios in 1955 looking for talent. She had no acting background and did not need one. She stayed for the full 4-year run, one of only 9 who did. When the show ended, she left quietly, graduated high school, married, had a daughter named Stacy, and built a private life with no connection to the ears. In 1983, a car accident shattered her spine. She was paralyzed from the waist down and would spend the rest of her life in a wheelchair. What she did next was not what the industry expected from a former child star. She went back to school, earned a bachelor's degree, then a master's in psychology from Fresno State University. She worked at a shelter for battered women. She served on the board of the California Association of the Physically Handicapped. She attended every reunion the cast held and sat patiently while strangers told her they had named their daughters Karen in her honor. She died of a heart attack in Fresno, California on October 6, 2019, at age 73. She had come to the show with no experience and no expectations, and left it with exactly the same lack of pretension. Just a woman in a wheelchair who kept showing up, kept doing the work, and never once suggested the world owed her anything different. Number 7 is Bobby Burgess, who auditioned for the show 5 times before being chosen, and who was finally cast after dancing barefoot to a jazz version of Rock Around the Clock in the Disney studios. He was one of 9 to stay the full 4 years. When the show ended in 1959, he went back to finish his senior year of high school and graduated in the top 2% of his class, a result he credited entirely to the quality of the on-set tutoring Disney provided. Lawrence Welk himself later said he had no trouble with Bobby Burgess because Bobby had been raised by Walt Disney. That is precisely how Burgess got to the Lawrence Welk Show. In 1961, as a college student, he and his childhood dance partner Barbara Boylan entered a Welk dance contest and won. The prize was a single appearance on the show. The audience reaction was strong enough that Welk hired them permanently. Burgess danced on the Lawrence Welk Show from 1961 to 1982, 21 consecutive years, 3 different dance partners. He married Christy Florin, daughter of Welk's own accordionist Myron Florin, on Valentine's Day 1971. They had 4 children. He opened his cotillion school in 1987, has taught dance to young students in Palos Verdes, California ever since, and still tours. He is 84 years old and still moving. The boy who danced barefoot and got the job has not stopped dancing in 70 years. Number 8 is Cubby O'Brien, the freckle-faced drummer whose mother gave him his nickname as an infant because she thought he looked like a bear cub, and who grew up to become one of the most respected percussion musicians in American entertainment. He was 9 years old when Disney talent scouts discovered him playing drums at a charity benefit in 1954. He sang Happy Birthday for his audition and was placed on the show's first-string Red Team, the only cast member permitted to play an instrument on camera. He stayed for 3 seasons. When the show's run ended, Disney offered him and Karen Pendleton contract extensions together. Karen's father declined. Both were released. What followed was a career most session drummers would spend a lifetime attempting to build. The Lawrence Welk Show, Spike Jones, and Margaret, 6.5 years as the on-camera drummer for the Carol Burnett Show, where Carol would stop mid-segment to chat with him in front of the audience. Then, the Carpenters. Beginning in 1973, he became the touring drummer for Karen and Richard Carpenter, filling in the live percussion while Karen stepped to the microphone to become the front woman the world needed her to be. He introduced Karen Carpenter to legendary big band drummer Buddy Rich. His tenure with the Carpenters lasted through the early 1980s. He has since drummed for Broadway touring productions and for Bernadette Peters, who once leaned across a dinner table and told him, in confidence, that he had been her favorite Mouseketeer. He is 78, still performing, and was present at Disneyland's 75th anniversary celebration in July 2025. Number 9 is Sherry Alberoni, who got her spot on the Mickey Mouse Club not because of her dancing or her singing, but because her brother panicked during his own audition and pointed at her to save himself. She was born on December 4th, 1946, in Cleveland, Ohio, and by age 2 was already modeling for magazines. In the spring of 1956, her brother Roy auditioned for the second season and bombed. With his chances disappearing, he told the casting judges his little sister could play the trumpet while tap dancing simultaneously. They called her in. She nearly knocked her front teeth out doing it. What actually clinched the job was her lisp. Director Sidney Miller found it so charming he began rewriting her lines specifically to include as many S sounds as possible, just to hear her say them. She joined the Blue Team at 9 years old as the season's youngest Mouseketeer, performing under the stage name Sherry Allen, because her first agent warned that the name Alberoni might cost her work. Lou Costello personally advised her to go back to her real name. She did. After the show, she built a steady career in television guest work across the 1960s, before landing her most lasting legacy in voice acting, playing the scheming Alexandra Cabot in Josie and the Pussycats and Wendy in the first season of Super Friends. Generations of Saturday morning children heard her voice and never once connected it to the girl with the trumpet and the lisp. She married Dr. Richard Van Meter on her own birthday in 1971. She is 78, still living in Southern California, and still the only Mouseketeer who got the job because her brother panicked. Number 2 is Darlene Gillespie, who should have been the breakout star of the show, and who, 40 years after the cameras stopped, was sitting in a federal courthouse being convicted on 12 counts of conspiracy, securities fraud, and perjury.
Time to twist our mousket dial to the right and the left with a great big smile.
Born in Montreal in 1941 to a vaudeville dance team, she arrived at the Disney audition in March 1955 with a crystalline voice and enough natural stage presence that producers recognized it in the first 5 minutes. She was widely expected to become the dominant face of the show. Then Annette happened. As Funicello's popularity exploded, Gillespie found herself pushed steadily into the background. By multiple accounts, the resentment never fully faded. She kept working after the show, recording albums under the Disney label, appearing in National Velvet and Dr. Kildare, releasing country music under the name Darlene Valentine. None of it recaptured the moment. She quietly earned a nursing degree and spent the bulk of her adult life as a cardiac care nurse. It looked, from the outside, like a graceful pivot. Then came 1997, a petty theft conviction for helping her fiancé shoplift 4 women's shirts. 3 days in jail, 3 years probation. Then came 1998, 12 federal counts.
Ernest Borgnine won the Academy Award.
Okay, I surrender. But I still say I had a good time in 1950.
Conspiracy, securities fraud, mail fraud, obstruction of justice, and perjury. Charges connected to a stock manipulation scheme run with that same fiancé. She was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison. In court, she told reporters she believed she would be vindicated. She was not. She served 18 months and was released. By 2011, she was living quietly in Oxnard, California, a retired nurse. The girl who was supposed to be the next Annette Funicello became instead the most cautionary story the show ever produced. Number 10 is Sharon Baird, who was already one of the most technically accomplished dancers in the entire cast before she walked through the Disney studio door, and whose legs had been insured for $50,000 by Lloyd's of London before she was 10. She was born on August 16, 1943, in Seattle, Washington, began tap lessons at 3, and by 7 was performing on the Colgate Comedy Hour as the personal protege of Eddie Cantor, who signed her to a personal contract and arranged the insurance policy himself. Fellow Mouseketeer Paul Petersen later said that, for pure dynamism, Sharon was hard to beat. She was on the red team for all 3 original seasons. When the show ended, she finished college with degrees in mathematics and secretarial science, married a singer named Dalton Lee Thomas in 1964, formed a nightclub act with him called 2 Cats and a Mouse, watched the act fade, watched the marriage follow it, and by 1969 was working as a secretary when Sid Croft called with HR Puffinstuff. She spent the 1970s performing inside elaborate foam and rubber costume suits for the Croft brothers, HR Puffinstuff, the Bugaloos, Sigmund and the Sea Monsters, Land of the Lost, conveying full emotion and physical storytelling through latex with no visible face. She was also the uncredited movement model for Frodo Baggins in Ralph Bakshi's 1978 animated Lord of the Rings, her body providing the rotoscoped foundation for the Hobbit's every step, her name appearing nowhere in the credits. She retired to Reno, Nevada in the 1990s and lives there today. Sharon Baird had her legs insured at 7 and spent the next 5 decades finding ways to use them that nobody saw coming. They broadcast their first episode on October 3, 1955. 39 children walked through those studio doors in Burbank and became something the country had never quite seen before and has never quite seen since. Today, most of them are gone. Some in hospitals, some in cemeteries. One in a bedroom in Oregon where nobody looked closely enough for 9 months. 4 are still here. The studio where they filmed all of it still stands on the Disney lot. In 2013, Disney dedicated that stage in Annette Funicello's name. The ears are still hanging on the wall inside. So are Sherry and Sharon and Bobby and Cubby. For now.